I feel fortunate that Memorial is in Union County because of that. A lot of hospitals have done layoffs. There's been a lot of hospital closures. And one of the things from a hospital financial perspective is to stay afloat, you need to make a margin. And expenses generally increase more quickly than revenues. And when that happens, the way to offset it is with continued growth. So that's the good fortune that all of us at Memorial have in working at Memorial and in Union County. So I'm equally as interested to hear the discussions that I've been watching online that are going on around development. So thank you all for coming. With that, my goal is to keep this at 1 hour. I was adding up the years of experience here. We've got over 100 years of experience between these three young guys. So I'm excited to hear them talk. So let me start with maybe a quick introduction of each one of them. First to my left is Bart Barrick. Bart is the owner of Sox Real Estate Company. He's a partner with Rockford Development Investors and previously spent 36 years with Nationwide doing real estate, property development, and that sort of thing. He's involved, as are all three of them, in the Central Ohio BIA, Building Industry Association. So they all have a lot of experience and a lot of history. The second person in the middle is Joe Thomas. Joe is the Director of Development for Metro Development. Joe has been with Metro for 28 years, and prior to that, he was a site supervisor, then became the Director of Construction Operations, and then for many years since then, he's been the Director of Development. So thanks for joining us, Joe. And then lastly, but not least, we have Matt Callahan. Matt is a Division Vice President of Land Acquisition for Pulte. He's also, as is Joe, a member of BIA, as I had mentioned, but he's been in a similar role, really, most of his career, starting first with Rockford Homes, then moving on to Dominion, and then, of course, now with the Pulte Group. So with that, I want to give them each a few minutes, 5-7 minutes, to talk about their background and their experiences and share a little bit more about themselves with each of you. So if you would, join me in giving all three of them a hand. And so Bart, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. Bart Barrick, like you said, you might wonder why 36 years at Nationwide, why I'm sitting up here. But the last 14 years at Nationwide, I was in Nationwide Realty Development. We built the area district, Grandview Yard, and I managed a little tiny project, about 2,000 acres, 3,000 homes called Jerome Village in Southern Union County. So we've took that project on, and over the last 14 years, we brought it to where it is. It's about 1,800 houses and ultimately 2,000 acres. The commercial development down there is growing. Just about 2 years ago, I took early retirement from there to go out and start my own company. Like Spence said, Sox Real Estate is my own company. That is a consulting, land development. I do large lots for custom builders and entitlements. Through that entity in Union County, I've got a couple projects underway. One of them is 190 acres down in Jerome Township. I'm actually working with Matt on that project, and we are doing patio homes and single family there. I've got another project that I'm consulting on, which is a 1,000-acre overlay in the township, and we're going to do mixed-use development there, which will include an industrial, office, multifamily, and some residential or office and retail. And that's through Sox Real Estate in Marysville. My Sox entity actually has 100 acres that I'm bringing through the zoning process right now for single family down off of Weaver Road. Vince had mentioned, or Spence had mentioned, that I partner with Rockford Homes. We have a partnership called Rockford Development Investments. Jerome Village was all about master planning, doing a large area connectivity, all the things that you want to get diverse housing. So Rockford Homes realized the need for that in Central Ohio, and Bobby and I partnered to create Rockford Development Investments. And we are doing larger master plan communities in Central Ohio. In Marysville, we started with a small one. We've got a multifamily project and a coffee shop that we're doing at the corner of 31 and 33. Coffee shop is under construction right now, and the multifamily is approved and start construction later this summer. And then we've got 3 sites that we are bringing through in Marysville here in the next probably 30, 45 days. And they will all be fairly large mixed use developments.
Again, Joe Thomas, Metro Development. As Spence mentioned, I've been in the housing industry for roughly 28 years as an adult. I actually had worked for the company I currently work for since roughly 1978. Probably some of those years probably was not on the payroll nor paid taxes. So if you want to, maybe drop a note to the IRS. I may owe a few $100s still, but regardless, I'm with a company that's owned by Don Kenny, who's been in the real estate development since 1964. My dad, Joe Thomas Sr., worked for Mr. Kenny from 1978 to 2007. High school, or maybe even grade school, I worked as a laborer on the construction sites doing, odd jobs for the development. But as I became an adult, I decided I want to stay in the construction industry. Started as a site supervisor with Don's office and Don's company. Through that whole process of my career, we've built homes in Central Ohio, and our mixture of homes over the years have been essentially attached product as far as multifamily. Some of it's been multifamily in the sense of condominiums, but since roughly 2010, we focus mostly on attached apartment product. More recently, we've done some developments here in Marysville, starting roughly 2019 with the residents at Cooks Point, up off of Cooks Point Boulevard and Route 4. And that location, we've done 264 apartments. Following the first phase of Cooks, we jumped over to Kenmore, which is like next to the Myers, located there at 33 and Coleman's Crossing. And we did another 264 apartments there. And during that process, we jumped back for a second phase at Cooks Point and did another 120 apartments there. So 2 developments, roughly 264 units in the city of Marysville, fully occupied. They actually, as we were constructing the sites, they were filling in as we completed each building. So we didn't wait for the entire site to be developed. We actually moved people in within 30 days of each site or each building getting their final CO. But we look forward to doing more developments in the Marysville area. As far as our Central Ohio developments, we're currently active in roughly 5,000 units throughout Central Ohio. Large predominant number of them are located in Columbus, but we do have surrounding developments throughout the Outer Belt area. So thank you very much.
Matt Callahan with Pulte Homes. I've been in the development business pretty much my entire career. I started with a small custom builder called P&D Builders back in the early 90s. And I was actually involved with a development out on 245 called Hunter's Run. Following that, as Spence said, I went to Rockford Homes, still involved with the development business. From there, I moved on to Dominion Homes. And again, active in the development business, vice president of development for Dominion. That was for about 12 years, I think. And then in 2014, Pulte Homes acquired Dominion. And since then, I've been with Pulte. Our work has been all throughout Central Ohio during my time with all of those entities. Mostly detached single family residential. We've done some attached. We've done some light commercial, mixed in some other things, but most of my work has been on the single family residential side. Currently we're involved with several developments in Union County, specifically Jerome Township area. And I've also, in fact, we just grand opened a new community up on 31 called Amrine Meadows just last weekend. Had a nice opening, so we're really proud of that community. And over those years, I've had made a lot of connections with folks, both with the county and with the city, and have always felt a really good partnership and connection to the people we work with, and feel like we've had successful partnerships to bring new communities and new development to the city of Marysville and also in Union County.
Yeah, thank you. Matt, let's start with you since you have the mic. I have a few questions that I've kind of outlined that I wanted to ask, but at the end, we'll save some time for some audience questions as well. So my first question is what does healthy residential growth look like for a community? You guys have been in this community and other communities, so you've seen it in a lot of different aspects. And what does it, when it's done in a healthy way, what does that mean for the community?
Yeah, I think when it's done in a healthy way, number one, it's planned out well. Also, I think there's a mix of different types of development. It really shouldn't and can't be homogeneous. There's different housing needs for different socioeconomic, you know, classes and people. So there needs to be diverse development, and it needs to be well thought out and well planned. Connecting communities, walkable communities, open spaces, trails and paths. So I think it's, you got to balance the type of growth you have and where, and just keep a good mix.
Thank you. Joe?
Very good question. Very good answer by Matt. Not to, obviously, I could just say ditto, but I'll add a little bit more to it. We spent a lot of time working not only internally with our own organizations, we spend time with each community, both with their municipal partners, such as the planning departments, the utility departments, the economic growth departments, and so on. And there's a lot of input as far as working with those different individuals and or departments that give us, a lot of insight on what necessarily is a good plan and what is necessarily a plan that would be successful in their community. So, where we start is with the actual planning department with any of our developments, and that helps us understand what necessarily they're looking for, what the citizens of the community are looking for, because behind that is also a conceptual plan or a future land use plan or a comprehensive plan that a lot of input's been put into by the individual departments looking at those plans to say, hey, this is an idea, a conceptual idea, but something that we would like to see as a future growth of this community. So those are a lot of benchmarks, and we know there's a lot of effort put on those. So for a successful community is essentially to use that future land use plan and use it effectively to work with people like ourselves who develop property and to fulfill that dream of the residents and the actual planners per se, to fulfill that. So they look at any way, shape, or form how this can successfully help, for instance, City of Marysville. Mm-hmm. So they look at that future land use plan and say these are more important ideas, such as thoroughfare areas, larger impact areas, higher density areas, commercial areas, and that nature. And it really helps us more in the idea that if we are reviewing their documents, we know what to plan for, what to look for, and come into a community that is more predictable. Mm-hmm. Predictability is important in our business, and I think a successful community is very predictable and very consistent with their policies, and we don't have to essentially recreate the wheel every time we look forward to a plan.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I would answer that ditto. I would add a couple different things. On the comprehensive plan, it is the guide that developers use. So, time and effort needs to be put in there. Marysville has a very good comprehensive plan. Jerome Townships was done in 2008. They're going through that process now. It's a mind-numbing process, but it's one that is valuable because, it's the starting point that development goes. I made a comment that I do master planning for a living, and I will go one step beyond the master or the comprehensive plan. And to get the diversification of housing and to get areas to be able to develop quicker and more effectively, tie together the roadways connected and all those sort of things, you got to go one step past the comprehensive plan, and that's into the master planning and the overlay zoning of that. If you let developers come in, we have a bad tendency of being very homogeneous. Somebody will be successful doing piecemeal development, getting 60, 70 acre parcel through zoning, and they get utilities spread across the site next couple years, and then the next development comes along on the 60, 70 acres to the east, northwest, whatever beside it. That developer wants to be successful because nobody likes to fail. So what do? Well, the previous developer got this done, 65-foot lots, 2 units an acre. We're going to do the same thing because we want to get successful, and you get very homogeneous product there. And I call it piecemeal development. With master plans, you can plan where you want on larger parcels. You can plan where you want your empty nester and where your apartments need to go and where the infrastructure and the roadways and how you create park structures. And that's what we did at Jerome Village. We created a master plan that had all that connectivity. We saved the nice tree stands and the creeks and that, and we put the density in the cornfields. And, you know, there's some pods down there that have 3-4 units an acre, and you would never notice it the way they're constructed. So master planning and then overlay zoning, which allows zoning to be administrative over a long period of time after it's set initially, are some of the things that made Jerome Village successful. And obviously that's my background. The other thing to a healthy market is I grew up in the 80s. I went to Ohio State, just like Eric did. And it was supply and demand. I'm a big fan of supply and demand. Marysville, for example, right now is out of balance, and all of Central Ohio. The demand for housing in Central Ohio is 25,000 homes short right now. And we're doing 12 to 13,000 units in Central Ohio per year, but that's 6,000 to 7,000 units short. So we're falling farther and farther behind every year. In Marysville, supply and demand, the best example that I can show is some statistics that Eric's has shown in previous sessions, and that you have 22,000 people driving into Marysville to work every morning, and you have 22,000 people every morning driving out of Marysville to go work somewhere else. If we build more housing, traffic will be better. It sounds strange to say it that way, but if you put more housing here, the 22,000 people that are coming into work in Marysville may have a place to stay right now. And you know, in all these sessions, they talk about how many houses are on the market, and it's 20 to 30 that's on the market and available right now. That's existing houses. And it's a very shallow market in Marysville because there's a lot of people that want to live here. And I think there's a question that'll help address that a little bit later.
Yeah, thank you. Speaking of the timeliness and where we are on the curve of supply demand for homes, and when you think about Marysville and our community, Union County as a whole, and the range of homes, you know, whether it's starter homes, apartments, executive homes, how important to developers and to the community do you think timing is? You mentioned the timing and where we are now behind. What can communities do to improve that, to help with that? And how does not doing it well impact a community and the developers as well?
I'm old, so there's too many questions there for me to address them all at the same time. But I'll take one of the first ones, and that's I just lost my train of thought. See how old I am? But anyhow, the question.
Just general timeliness of supply, demand, and
timing is extremely important. If I touch a piece of ground, say I find a farm field that is interested in selling, at the point in time I touch it, I have 90 days of due diligence to make sure that it's a piece of ground that I can develop. Then there's easily 6 months to 9 months worth of development from a zoning engineering standpoint. Once you get the zoning, then you go into the engineering process, and it's probably anywhere from 6 to 9 months longer than that. Most of the time, it's at least 18 months before I can put a shovel in the ground, or my developer or home builders do that. Central Ohio has a 20-year low on inventory of lots right now, okay? And we are under the 18-month mark. Normally, we were somewhere around 30 months of lot inventory, and that doesn't mean that there's ground in the works. That meant lots that are zoned and ready to be built by the builders as they go along. That normal inventory, if you go back about 15 years, was somewhere around 30 months, but we are below 18 months. So if I touch a piece of ground today, the lots that are being sold and developed right now are not being replaced. So this housing crisis is going to get worse before it gets better in Central Ohio, because the people keep coming. Morpsey's million people are coming, and they've been coming for the last 2 or 3 years. Things that we can do, I just mentioned master planning and overlay zoning. Cities have, and townships have, the right to overlay zoning, which makes it administrative for developers to pick it up if we're following what the overlay zoning says. It eliminates probably a 4 or 6 month process in the zoning window there, and it becomes much, much quicker to get to it. It comes off the comprehensive plan, it comes off a master plan, and then the city or the township overlays that zoning, which can speed the process. The other thing is getting more resources. You know, Union County engineer, cities, townships, all of that sort of stuff. We've got to find ways to get them more resources. And that's something that the BIA has been trying to work with all over Central Ohio. It just hasn't been real successful to get more staff to be able to get things through quicker.
To build upon that question that Bart just answered, the utilities and roadway network is also important. If the area is what we consider shovel ready, it means we don't have to spend great effort and time expanding the existing local utilities to the site border or the site boundary. That eliminates months and possibly years of starting a development. So if a project has sanitary sewer and water and an outlet for a storm and gas and electric at its property line, that eliminates, a lot of that delay time that may take, a municipality, either them extending the utility or a developer extending the utilities to that property line. So that is probably when we look at land and we look at, identify an area, that's usually one of the first key items we look for is utilities and or roadway networks. Roadway networks, as everybody probably understands, is, traffic is probably the major concern for a lot of areas. And probably one of our major questions when we're doing a rezoning within any community is traffic is a concern for everybody. But as Bart mentioned, if we're able to build more housing, we can answer that question pretty quickly in the sense that if the people can live, work, and play within the same community, then the traffic eliminates itself pretty dramatically. So if your house is next to your employment area, the commute distance and traffic concerns are almost eliminated to where, there is a 5 or 10 minute drive versus a 30-minute drive. As Bart mentioned, there's 22,000 people traveling on Route 33. If you can take at least half of those trips and get them down to 10,000, you eliminate the congestion on Route 33. So there's a number of issues. And for us, and I said it earlier, is predictability. If a community and their policies and their land plans and their overlays are predictable, it really speeds up the process. If we can go to an application and turn that around and have a rezoning and then get our plans approved, we're much quicker to get to the starting point. For example, I do, like I mentioned, do a lot of development. I've had a number of communities that would take me roughly from start to finish 3.5 to 4 years. And that is putting the ground in contract, going to the rezoning process, going through the engineering process, starting the construction, and then finally having occupancy is roughly 4 years. Now, one good point about the city of Marysville, I was able to eliminate roughly 2.5 years or two years in the process. The communities I did in Marysville, I was take the average in Columbus from roughly 4 years down to 1.5 to 1 year and 9 months, which was because they're predictable, they're consistent in their policies, their land use plan is very easy to follow, and the staff is wonderful to work with. So it takes a lot of effort on everybody's part to make, from a development standpoint, to make it quicker. Thank you.
If this was a debate, I wouldn't have anything to rebut with what either Joe or Bart said. But just reiterating some of the things, I think a streamlined and predictable process is extremely important. And then, as Bart said, staffing is a big issue. These guys have talked about the time it takes to get a product to market. And I mentioned in the opening that we just grand opened a new community in the city last weekend. I think we filed the annexation for that just about 2 years ago, and we had put it in contract prior to that. So from the time we filed annexation to the time we grand opened, it was 2 years until we were able to actually go out to the market and actually start, trying to sell homes. That's pretty quick, actually, and we overall feel pretty good about that. If you can believe that 2 years is fairly quick, and that's because of a lot of the partnerships and the hard work that we've done with the city. And so as Joe said, they have a fairly predictable process. But the volume you get more challenges. So you got to make sure there's enough staffing that can be continued, and you continue to have the supply because, as Bart said, again, the number one issue today is we just have too much demand and not enough supply. And that exacerbates the issue of affordability, which I think everybody's feeling in the market. So having that streamlined and predictable process and really being able to, get to work as quickly as possible is extremely important and helps, address the supply problem, which is going to help address the issue of affordability as well.
So what I'm hearing the three of you say is that decisions that are being made today aren't really a today decision, but they're impacting the communities 5 years, 4 years, even maybe 10 years down the road. So if you feel that you don't have enough housing now and you believe there's going to be tremendous growth, the decisions that are made now have to factor in years and years down the road based on timing.
But I thought that might be an issue tonight, fighting you for the mic, but yeah, I think, and that's really perhaps one of the biggest misnomers in our business. When we bring a new community online, and if it's 200 units or 300 units or however big, it is, I think there's a tendency for people to think it's all going to happen overnight. But these things play out over years. A 300 lot community is going to take on the short side, 5.5, 6 years to, on the long side, 10 years, 12 years by the time it builds out. So there's a lot of planning and there's a lot of effort that really has to be done in foresight. And in our business and what I do working on the land acquisition and development side of things, I'm really not entirely focused on what we're doing today. I'm not entirely focused on what we're doing for 2024. My focus is on 2025, 26, 27, because we're looking at, that's the reality of when, we need to have our next supply or round of units and lots to be able to meet the demands of the market.
Spence mentioned it, so I'm going to jump into this here. Just some of the decisions are so long-term that you lose sight of them. Marysville is really poised for more growth than other parts in Central Ohio because you have businesses that want to be here. But the other piece is you've had a county commissioner group and a city council group that has went through multiple terms and multiple people that set this up. That treatment plant in between Marysville and Jerome was $105 million. That took some gall to make that decision, to make that investment. Now they made it in 2006, 2007, the market tanked and we all quit building houses. But Jerome Village would not be there without that treatment plant. They've invested another $50 million in a water treatment plant that allows everybody in Marysville to water their grass during the summer without moratoriums on watering, but it also sets a capacity that allows the growth for all of Union County because Union County commissioners are allowing Marysville to run the water and utilities. If you look around, they're also continuing to make investments. They have a $15 million pump station on the east side. You go down Industrial Parkway and you'll see a water tower under construction. The tap fees in Union County are some of the highest in Central Ohio, but I will tell you that your city council members, Marysville, Union County, they put that money back to work to reduce some of that cost into the future to allow this growth to occur. And those decisions, again, were made in 2008 and many, many years ago in order to get the capacity that allows us to use it today.
So, go ahead, Joe. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Good.
So, considering that, communities are competing for development projects in Central Ohio because of the growth and the demand, what do you think, we've talked about timing, but what other things can be done to set a community apart? Or from your experience, what sets Union County apart? You've talked about the infrastructure. What other things come to mind when developers are looking at this area for development?
Well, from a standpoint of what we look for is basically a strong job market. And I think Marysville can state, the job market, not to mention Memorial Hospital, let's put a plug in for that one, but, Honda of Marysville and of course Scott's, two large employers that we look for. And I think Marysville has done a wonderful job and Union County has done a wonderful job and continue growing those or helping those businesses grow. And with that, obviously makes a relationship for us as developers to understand that there's need for more housing. So that is probably one of the strongest things that we look for is the job market, and how much and it can't be a declining job market. We look for a growing job market that is ever, reaching its goal and increasing its, need for more jobs or more labor force or growing their actually facilities and that kind of nature that they because I guess the misnomer is not only necessarily that the businesses themselves and their operations, such as Honda making cars, but they're forever growing their actual business facilities. So they're always building, and within the building industry itself is the actual labor and the skilled labor that produces those buildings, as well as our buildings that are also, a vital, important part of the economy. And we all found out in 2007, 8, and 9 that the housing industry is a large portion of the economy. When the housing industry tanks or the housing industry goes in recession, the country follows. So it's kind of evident that, not only we can't survive without the jobs and the employment, a lot of the employment and the jobs can't survive without the housing. So I guess our statement is always that basically for every house we build, there's roughly 1.2 jobs created. And that's simple for the number of permits that are pulled versus the jobs that are created in any 10, county area in central Ohio. So it's kind of a number that we've, have looked at and continue to look at, that anytime there's an actual job that's created because of a housing industry. So.
Yeah, I think the two most important things from our perspective are schools and access to employment. As I said, we do a lot of detached single family, so the schools are very important. Obviously, here in the city, it's a great school district where we've done the predominance of our development in the county. It's been in Jerome Township, and again, we're dealing with really strong school districts. I don't want to wade too far into, what could be a politically sensitive issue, but, I think Marysville has an important issue to decide here in the near future with their school levy. And I think, it's important to maintain those strong schools. The access to good employment, as everyone said, the 33 corridor has been vibrant for a long time. And discussing this with someone earlier today coming up here and doing this session, I made a comment to the effect that, everyone's talking about Intel out east here recently, but, Honda really was that, 25 years ago or more, right? 30, 35, whatever, however many, 40. So, it's been a vibrant job creator and vibrant corridor for a long time. And, the access to that employment is also extremely important.
Bart, is there anything you wanted to add?
Infrastructure, schools, and master planning. The master planning piece, I'll add a soundbite to that. And Marysville is very, very attractive because they allow diversification of housing. And when you do master planning like I do, or like at Jerome Village, where we have a number of different builders, different products across that, Marysville code sets up really, really well to do that and to bring that. And when I say master planning or diversification of housing, I'm not talking about affordable housing. Affordable housing is a unicorn right now because of construction costs and land prices and labor and everything else. I mean, everybody would love more affordable housing. It is just next to impossible to build right now without massive government subsidies. But when I talk about diversification, I am talking about the desire to have production and custom homes and what we call the missing middle market, which are townhomes and attached residentials. And then you've got your patio homes and empty nester, and lo and behold, the apartment dwellers that you need. That creates a healthy market. And when I look around Central Ohio at some of the great communities, and I look truly at their zoning code only, I would swear to God that these people hate their kids, because their zoning code wants large lots, really expensive houses, and they don't want any diversification of housing. So when your kid goes away, and that's what I think Marysville gives, when your kid goes away for college, they can come back to the community that they grew up in, and they can rent an apartment, or they can buy their first house or their second house and kind of move up there. There are great communities, and I will say great communities in Central Ohio, but they want these large homes, and they want that you can't afford until you're 35, making $200,000 a year to be able to move back in the neighborhood that you came from. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but that has spawned from the areas that have been very successful doing that. And that creates traffic issues because the people that work there, or the teachers and the firefighters, can't live in those communities. Marysville's not that way. Your code, your comp plan, and your ability up here allows that diversification for housing to exist. And that is probably the number one, as a master planner, number one issue that I see that you're willing to allow me to take 200 acres and put 4 or 5 different products, connect them together in a community type base. And that's what I do for a living.
So, you know, there's obviously hesitation in a lot of communities for new development. You know, there's a lot of players that come are impacted, whether it's schools, businesses, city infrastructure, streets, you know, community members in different ways. If you were on a soapbox and had the ability to talk about that, what would you say to folks? What would you say are the reasons that, you know, more residents, more housing should be constructed and what it means to the community?
Well, I'm in the multifamily business, so I'll answer from that side of it, and I'll let these two gentlemen answer from the other types of developments. But, you know, as far as the school challenge, and we hear it in every community, you know, our opportunity is that we get to build in school districts that everybody values. And that's why they're bringing the question up, because they value that school district, they value the importance of that school district, and the residents that we're providing homes for value it as well. So it's the challenge of how do you balance both? And the balance for any development is to, you know, properly plan, not only for the developer, but also for the city, the municipality, and the school district. So as Bart mentioned, that long-term planning is the most important, even with school districts. There's not a way to build a school facility overnight. You know, they can't start today and have a school open, you know, 6 months from now when the school starts again, or 3 months, I'm sorry, when school starts again. So there's long-term planning. So it's a partnership of working with not only the city, but also developers like ourselves and the school district, the school board, and or the administration to understand the growth in the area and understand that, you know, there will be growth and there will be need for more school, you know, possible facilities. There may not be, but there may need to be. And to understand that growth is the most important part so they can plan for it. So they're not trying to pass emergency levies. They're not trying to pass emergency legislation to address that they're looking long-term, that they can see the horizon and say, you know, we have, you know, X number of people moving to City of Marysville, Union County every day. We have a certain number of children that are moving in with those people that we need to plan for. For apartments, it's not a large impact. You know, for every 100 apartments, we may have roughly 2 to 10 children for those 100 apartments. Now, it all depends on the location of the community near and how close it is to a school, for instance. Again, apartment individuals do not like to travel far for anything, be it their job, be it their grocery store, or even their schools. So if we develop a piece of property and it's close to a school, we may have a larger number of children. If we develop a property that's further away, we may have less. But in all, it's not a large tax on the school with the actual number of children. But our property taxes we generate do help support the schools. So for instance, if it cost us roughly in any one of our communities $1,600 a door property tax a year, or up to some communities $3,000 or $4,000, and that's for a 600 or 700 square foot apartment. You start looking at the gross revenue in any one of our communities. It's, you know, some of our communities are, you know, 400,000 annually on gross taxes, and some are $2 million on annual taxes. And we don't generate that many school children. So as Bart mentioned earlier, diversification of housing not only will help the solution for the school impacts, but also help support the actual funding for the school.
Yeah, Spence. So, you know, you said if we were on a soapbox and, you know, wanted to make the speech for things, I think I would, you know, harken back to the old saying that, you know, if you stop growing, you start dying, or I might be paraphrasing that. But, you know, and some would argue that maintaining the status quo is somewhat of a slow death. So I think, you know, positive balanced growth is a good thing because it creates opportunity. It creates quality of life, new services, new amenities, where you have things that maybe have gone a little bit stale. You give things, you know, there's an opportunity to revive things. So when you've got that positive growth, you know, I think you continue the positive momentum in a community. You know, when we show up and we've been doing this work for a long time, I have in particular, well, we all have, but when we show up in a community and people show up and they're concerned, maybe they're in opposition. A lot of times it actually makes you feel good because you're in a place where people care about their community. And if they care, it means, you're in a good community and you want to become a part of it. So, when you can weave yourself into the fabric of the community and help create that positive growth, which, creates new opportunities, quality of life, services. I think that's some of the positives that come along with new development. Last summer, Eric invited a few of us to a Chamber of Commerce event with a lot of local small business owners. And the number one thing that I heard over and over again from those business owners was, we need housing. We need places for our people to live. They had, people coming from, 20, 30 miles away, and they weren't always sure the people were going to show up because their car might break down or they have other issues. So it's just really interesting that, or I think it's really important, pardon me, that you have that type of housing opportunity to be able to support those local businesses and the needs of their employment.
Matt touched on it. It's as simple as grow or die. And I mean that from a standpoint, when you look at the city, you look at the school system and those sort of, it's not unconnected that some of the best school districts are in the areas that have grown the most. I mean, Olentangy schools, New Albany schools. New Albany schools used to be a little tiny rural school district, very similar to Fairbanks Local. But that growth and that additional revenue that comes in from growth has supported it. Try, if you're a treasurer of the Marysville schools, try to do your budget if you don't have future revenues coming in from additional housing. And let's look at the facts. And it's not a great fact, but the housing now, the new houses are 40 to 45% higher than the value of the existing houses. And the county auditor just increased, I believe, the existing houses by 23.8% or something close to that. But the new houses that are coming in are paying more in real estate tax. They are paying more in income tax. And from the city income tax standpoint, try to do that in a city that's declining. The last session, I believe we had the mayor of Tiffin, Ohio, that talked about what happens to a decaying city that does not grow and misses opportunities to grow. Marysville's got a great path because that growth of housing will also bring the businesses and vice versa. But essentially, it's as simple as grow or die. I mean, you don't want to manage, you don't want to live in an area that is not growing. Now, township, rural characteristics, all that sort of stuff farther out, I totally grew. I grew up on a 300-acre farm in Pickaway County, so I understand that. But, the peripheries around the city, that is meant to pick that up. And if 1 million people are coming to Columbus, we've got to grow in those areas.
Okay. We've got about 14 minutes left. I think Joe grew tired of my question, so he left. Actually, he had to be at a zoning meeting, so that's why he left. Let's open it up to the audience now. Eric has a microphone that he'll pass around. If you have questions, please ask. I appreciate the three of them and now the two of them being here to answer questions. So try to keep your questions succinct so that we can get a number of them in before we have to wrap up in a few minutes.
Yeah, we do want to thank everyone for coming out tonight for the longest day of the year. A lot of sunshine outside, so thanks for coming out. But furthermore, it's Bart Barrick's birthday, so happy birthday, Bart, right? So, and he's spending with us. Nothing better to do tonight on your birthday, Bart. Any questions, Mr. Stolte?
Thank you, Steve Stolte. You talked about the being able to, as a benefit to be able to move projects along faster. You talked about going from 4 years, what it may be in Columbus, down to 2 years or less. And I assume time is money. So does that, when time is money, does that savings in time translate to putting money in your pocket or in reducing the cost of the product when it's coming for sale? And if it's the latter, how do the citizens know that it's actually that the cost of the product is a little bit lower because of that shortening of the development process?
I'll take a piece of that, but Matt's probably better to answer that from the house building because essentially time is money, especially right now. But a lot of that time equates to time with us, putting it in, additional plans, legislative, those type of actions moving forward. The farmers that are selling us the ground are waiting for their payment, and that puts pressure on that relationship there. But it doesn't mean savings. I mean, everything is a market condition, and the price of a home is going to be a price of the home in a market. Now, right now, those prices are up because supply and demand have done that. Construction costs, labor costs, there's a whole bunch of stuff. But I think it's less savings of time if we can reduce that timeline, and a better chance that we have an opportunity to put the demand or the supply on the ground that the demand is requesting. And that's there. If you've got 5 people that want a house, obviously the price goes up. I always hear the term greedy developers and stuff like that. I guarantee you that developers' profit is no more than any other business, et cetera. But those time frames really push our ability to sell the product to the customer further and further out.
Yeah, really good question. I think, a hard one to answer in terms of how you would ever, explain that or show that to the public. But I think, we're certainly in our business, we have to price to the market, and, the more that you're able to provide that supply to the market, and we're in a competitive environment, and, we've got to be able to sell and build homes, generate revenue. We're going to have to do that at a price that's competitive with the market. And I think the faster you can move through, new communities and bring them to market, as well as our competitors, you can create that competitive slate, and that'll translate to more affordable, housing. I think, the other thing, of course, there's an interest component. I mean, in every business, there's a carry cost. So again, it's hard to really show that to someone, I think, and really illustrate that to the public, but it's a real cost.
Thank you both. Great answers. And first and foremost, I want to thank you for your commitment, your time, and all you guys have done for our community, because your investment, tens of millions of dollars have been invested because of their developments. Another question.
What's the average cost of a single family new build?
Eric, you're probably best. You had statistics in Union County and Marysville at the last meeting.
I think that's a Luke answer. Luke, what's the average home price in Union County today on a new build? $420, which outprices most people that live here. That's what's scary about that. Yeah. The low end is the question. I don't know what the low end. We'd have to look at that.
I'll jump in a little bit on that, Eric. Bart said it earlier. I mean, affordable housing, or I think the way we like to think about more is housing affordability. The ability for people to attain home ownership is really challenging today because of construction costs, labor shortages, material shortages. The reality is, I think on the low end, probably the lowest you can really produce new single family housing, if we're talking about detached housing, is probably the mid to upper 300s. And even that's really hard to attain. Most of the
square footage.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Square footage. What's the size of the home?
I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about price points. Okay. What's the square footage of those homes? Yeah, there are. I mean, and I think, that goes hand in hand with some of the things Bart talked about, relative to some of the zoning standards. The more exclusionary or more strict the requirements are for the new housing, the more it's going to drive up the prices, and the more the market's opened up to be able to build a little more affordable product, you're going to be able to bring in a lower cost home.
Okay. Another question.
Let me add something there, Eric. So the missing middle is part of that solution. And the missing middle are attached products, whether it's duplexes or triplexes. It's also townhomes. In the townhome market, we've got some builders that are going to bring that. And we do think that will be below a $3,000 or $300,000 price point. That's for 15 to 1,800 square foot. It could be a little bit lower, but when you get that density and you don't have the single family, the detached part of it, you can then start saving some money from a market standpoint and bring more affordable housing options, not affordable housing, more affordable housing options through the diversification of the product that you offer.
Janelle Alexander. My question is, what is the difference between the price? Could you tell us like the dollar amount of the price point versus what it costs to build it? Because I hear them say it's $400,000, but I feel like that's what the demand is creating. I was just wondering, what does it cost to build it? And I feel like it should be different.
I don't build the homes, so I've got to pass that off to Matt. But I will say this from a land standpoint, and that's really where I focus, is I always promise the farmers that I'm buying that I will pay them the most money that I can. And I can give you a long list of farmers that will assure that I try to do that, predicated on two things. One, the density that I can get. The higher density, the more I can pay that farmer. And the offsite infrastructure. How much does it cost me to get utilities to the site? Those are my two main factors when I'm pricing land, paying for it. And there could be a farmer that is sitting right on the utility line and that has a higher density in a comp plan that I can pay twice what I could pay somebody a mile down the road that I might have to put $3 million in the ground to get the utilities there. Now, your question, I don't build the houses, so I can't answer that question, but
He'll still try to give you an answer though.
Yeah, I don't build them either. I'm on the land development side. We're on the cost or on the sale price side. We're going to price to the market. A lot of folks ask us, what's the price point of these new homes going to be? And I always try and give them the best guess based on our studying of the market and what we've predicted. But I always try to be clear to say, look, the market's going to dictate pricing. In some communities, when the market dictates the pricing, we're going to make a little more money. In some communities, we're going to make a little less money, just based on where the market's setting that pricing. I don't have exact figures as to cost, because I'm not as much on that side of our business. But on the revenue side and the housing price side, that's kind of how things go.
I will add just one thing. I would say right now, with the cost of money, inflation, interest rates, the labor shortage that we have in Central Ohio from the home building side, the land shortage, all the administrative stuff, I can't imagine that the profits are at a high right now on the home building side, because there are customers out there that want to buy a house that can't. And that is a dichotomy that a home builder doesn't want to have. We want to have houses for everybody that wants to buy it, and we can't produce that right now.
Clifford Collins. You indicated that the planning as well as the jobs are critical for that development process. What about the impact of availability, say retail or professional services, medical services, and so on? How does that impact the work that you're doing to bring homes to people?
It's a great question, and it impacts it greatly. So, I mean, people want to live close to services, especially things that I call residential retail, hair salons, workout facilities. They don't want to drive for long. Big box belongs in Marysville. Done a great job of planning. Most of your big boxes over in the Coleman Crossing area and stuff like that. It allows residential retail to get farther out. But I'll use the example of Jerome Village as the best one. We started that project and it really started construction in 2010, 2011, coming out of the downturn. And I use we, 36 years there. I'm not there anymore, but I still use we as a pronoun. But we've got 1,800 houses there, and Kroger's is just now going there. The first retail, the fire department is there. Primrose is there because there's a number of kids, and Kroger's just now decided after 14 years of development that there are enough rooftops in Jerome Village, and because it's 7 miles to get the post perimeter from Jerome going down into Tartan Ridge and Tartan Field, you need massive number of rooftops for the retails to come and stuff. The good thing is Marysville's over 20 some thousand people already here. So you've got those things, but as you add more and more people, you will get different selections of restaurants and those sort of things. You will get the fitness areas, the Planet Fitness and all those sort of things. And it will continue to grow. Some people will love that growth and some people won't, but the retail always follows the residential rooftops.
Yeah, I'll just briefly add to that. Pulte is a public company, and we are looking at making investments in new communities and projects. We have to go through an underwriting process internally, and part of that process, I'm envisioning some of the slides and maps that we put on in the presentation that we send to home office to get project approval. And there's always a slide in there that shows the community, with the location of the community, and it has, all the icons or all the signs of the different restaurants and services and amenities in the area to show, look, we're in an area of vibrancy. There's a Starbucks here, there's a Bob Evans here, there's, whatever the different restaurants are, some of the other retail services, Chick-fil-A, you name it. The other thing is Pulte is very heavily active in the active adult or empty nester community. So in addition to all of those services, the other thing that we look for is good medical services. So another plug for the hospital system, but we're also always looking for good access to medical services as well, particularly when we're focused on that, like I said, the active adult or empty nester type segment of our business. And we're looking to do more of that, in particular in the county here in the near future.
We need our seniors to stay here. A 2 Kroger County. What are we going to do? Another question. We have time for one more question. Anyone? Someone to raise their hand? Oh, we're in the back. Well, we got 2 right here.
This is Kevin Thalen. I'm with Jerome Township. I like your comment that when you build houses in the community and people can live and work in the community, it can actually help the traffic situation. I just think you'll have a hard time convincing folks in Jerome Township that's what's going on. So looking at the traffic, and honestly, you understand now developing between the Jerome Village and the Pulte houses going in, the traffic at Industrial Parkway and 33 and so forth is just getting terrible. Is there any way we can, I know that's not necessarily on you guys, but is there any way we can work better between the developers, between the township and the county and so forth to get ahead of this? Or is this just going to continue to get worse and worse as we go forward?
Everybody would love the infrastructure to be there day one, but it costs money to put that in the ground. So very rarely the roadway infrastructure gets there. The only place that's probably the exception was New Albany and Jerome Village. And Jerome Village happened because we had a Fortune 100 company with more money than God that was willing to put $100 million in the roadway infrastructures. Now there is a community authority that the future residents will pay back that through the millage. And that is a wonderful tool. The community authority is a wonderful tool that I have used in Jerome Township as I went through 40 some zonings at that township to explain to the residents, to answer one question: why should we pay for this growth? Okay, with a community authority paying for the infrastructure, which is really funded in the future by the residents that will live there, the existing residents aren't paying for that growth. But it takes substantial developments to put a community authority in place, and developers run a risk that if you put a community authority on a smaller parcel, that the next developer that comes in will undercut you by not doing that. So you really need to work with the cities and the townships to determine where that is. And it's a very specific tool, but it's probably one of the most successful things that we did at Jerome Village to make it what it is. Industrial Parkway and 42, I can't solve that answer. I know they're continuing to work on it and it needs fixed. I use ER Auto Care. I live just north of Jerome. I use ER Auto Care in Plain City. and I have to wait literally 5 to 10 minutes at that intersection. I would say go down Highland Croy, go down Jerome Road. I mean, the roadway improvements, the county engineer, the developments are coming. You've got a development on one side of that intersection. There's another proposed. The funding of that through the development is going to happen. It's probably still another year or two away. But that's the worst intersection, and I totally agree. Now, Mitchell DeWitt is another one. They do have the roundabout. The county has been working on that, et cetera. So that solution. And you've got all the figure eights down there in crazy figure eight land down there at Costco that was put in. And I always use Bill Nanducci as an example. He once said, why does money come out of the township or out of the county to support roadways that are in Dublin or in Columbus and those things? And the best answer that he's ever given is it usually doesn't come in advance, but water and traffic does not stop at township or county lines. So if those improvements down there that has all the industrial, et cetera, weren't made and they keep coming further up to the north, they weren't made initially. You're just sending the water and the traffic somewhere else. So you do have the infrastructure. If you live in Jerome Village, you know they're improving the intersection massively there. US 42 is the next one. Now it's way down the road because that's ODOT and some other issues. But I do know there is a solution that is on the table that they're working with on that 42 Industrial Parkway, because I think it's the highest priority in the entire city. And I've had that thought probably for the last 5, 6, 7 years. It's just the folks in Jerome Village, until we got Raven Hill out to 42, they really used Jerome and Highland Croy to kind of get out of that area. But those improvements are coming. And I know
Bart needs his own microphone, I think, right tonight. No, Matt, do you have any closing comments? Maybe that Bart really answered that question really well.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a whole lot to add. I know in the communities that we've worked on, we've worked closely with the county engineer and his staff, and also with ODOT on the Industrial Parkway 42 intersection, in addition to some of the other intersections. And we make contributions to mitigate our traffic impacts. And it sounds a little counterintuitive sometimes, but some of the new development, even though it will bring some additional traffic, it helps solve some of the existing traffic problems, because it creates a lot of those revenue streams to help improve those types of things. And with that, you have economic development tools that that the county and the township are very good at employing to be able to harness the revenue from that development to help fix some of those existing problems.
And the 42 Industrial Parkway, I think it's 2 years out, and that's an ODOT driven project. And the county wants it done yesterday, but it just has not happened because it's an ODOT driven project. Any closing comments from our speakers, our moderator or two speakers?
Well, no, I just want to thank both of them, Bart and Matt, for their time. I know you guys have a lot going on. You're busy people. The information you shared was enlightening for me, and I appreciate the opportunity to ask some questions. So thank you for tonight. Please join me in giving them another round of applause.
And I think they're sticking around if you want to ask any more questions. Our next event, I think, is July 19th. We'll have a panel of school superintendents to talk about growth and how growth and prosperity impact schools. So we encourage you to come back for that. It'll be at 5:30, an hour-long session. And then in August, we'll have retail and restaurant businesses to talk about the impacts of housing and what it means to them as well. So again, thank you for coming tonight. Enjoy your longer night tonight, the last long night we have of the year, I guess. But again, thanks to our speakers, and thank you for coming.